Hello and welcome to Show Studio. I'm Stavros Karelis and we're here to talk about one of the most exciting fashion designers during London Fashion Week Men's, Stefan Cooke, who showcased the first solo show called Drama Major. But before we're going into details about it, I would like to introduce the amazing set of panelists that I have here today, starting with you, John.
Yes. So, hi, my name is John Matheson, and I'm the writer and the creator for the Instagram archive McQueen Vault, and super excited to kind of talk about perspectives on the show today and discuss with you guys some of this fabulousness we've seen. So.
Great.
Hi, I'm Nina van Volkinburg. I am an ethnographer and pursuing my PhD at the University of Exeter, where my research is looking at the impact of digital disruption on the value creation processes within the fashion industry.
Hi, I'm Fabio Piras. I'm the course director of the Master in Fashion at Central St. Martin's.
Hi, I'm Liam Hess. I'm a writer and features editor at Buffalo Zine.
Great, thank you so much for being here. And I think that what an exciting show that we have to talk about, basically. We have a lot to talk about. But before going actually into the show, I would like to ask each one of you if you have any previous relationships with the brand. I mean, meaning that if you work with or you know the guys behind the brand, or from your field, because each one of you are experts in your own field, what type of relationship you see with that brand? Starting again with you, John. I'll change the order, so I'm not going to pick up on you all the time, sorry.
Honestly, I was introduced to the brand when I was asked to come on the panel, and I'm actually quite excited about that because part of being and doing what I do with the Instagram account is kind of, I enjoy seeing what brands project and the stories that they tell.
Absolutely.
And it's actually very exciting when I see someone new, because then it's like I get to start kind of at the outside and kind of work my way in to see if the storytelling is consistent, what it is they're offering, what they specialize in. And I was so delighted to dig deeper into the story of the brand because there was so many details here that I was quite bewitched with straight from the get-go.
Yeah.
So, and being kind of a bit of an archivist, it's cool to look and see bits and pieces that they've pulled together to create a very cohesive vision.
Great, amazing.
Well, I have always been, sorry.
I'm very interested in you, actually, but I'll tell you why. And because as an ethnographer, I try to understand a bit more about what it means. And I know that it's a bit more as a sociologist, pretty much. But you can tell us a bit more about it, because I also find extremely interesting your PhD subject as well.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
an ethnographer typically looks at, it's a study of people and the study of culture. And traditionally, you would have these academics going into different far-reaching countries and learning about different behaviors and different interactions. And in my case, I'm looking at the fashion industry because we've all witnessed the various behaviors and how we act, even the language, the way we present ourselves. And as we all know, clothing, it's how we show ourselves to the world. And so what I do is I have my notebook and I write down all of my observations. And I think today we're at a very unique tipping point because through social media, we have direct conversations with the end consumer. And then that translates into various products. And this links to what Stefan Cooke and what Jake are doing, because they see what's happening on the street, elements like tracksuits, and they're able to translate that into something a bit more high fashion, a bit more highbrow, but not in an arrogant way.
Yeah.
So they themselves are, in a way, ethnographers because they are picking up the culture from within.
Okay, and also, did you know the brand from before, or it was you started searching as well?
I've been following them really since at St. Martin's because I really like looking at the London new talent. Because I think London is, the incubator for new designers, and I mean, what they've done for the past 3 seasons at Fashion East have been very cutting edge and really connected with a lot of people worldwide.
Great, great. Fabio, I mean, I'm not going to ask you since when you know them, because probably you're the one that knows them for the longest. So can you tell us a bit more, because you were there, you know, like seeing that brand, that mind, that creativity being formatted basically and coming together. So it's your take is very interesting to all of us.
Well, obviously, I know Stefan and Jake. I've known them as students, and I've seen them starting their project. I really don't like to call it a brand to start with. Yeah. Now it's becoming a brand. Yeah. But, well, I mean, you know, I mean, it's my position is a position of privilege in a way. You know, I mean, like you see designers that become. That become very convincing voices in a very, very short time. And maybe it's because in a master's, then it is about that. It's about really discussing who you are as a creative, but also who you can be as a creative voice, you know, whether then you go and work for others, but also in their case, for themselves. But not necessarily as students. Okay. Actually, I think that it was very clear to, first of all, the partnership wasn't clear at all.
Oh, really?
As a creative partnership. I think they were friends, obviously, but not, you know, I remember asking them whether they wanted to do a collection together in collaboration, and the answer was no. So, you know, which is fair enough, I think. It's fair enough as students, you know. Yeah. So Stefan did his own, and then Jake did his own. But, so it was really, really good to see them getting together straight after the course in such a convincing way.
That's very interesting. So you I mean, of course, you know, with your experience and expertise, but you saw that these two can collaborate in such a good level, because collaborations and partnerships, which is something that I would like us to go in a bit later stage, is of course when it's successful is really, really good, but when it's a very difficult process as well, you know, for two people, you know, coming together and work together. But lately we see that that sometimes it's absolutely necessary, because the one actually helps the other, and together, you know, they put their skills and produce something really, really good. So do you see that happening often, or do you see a bit more people trying to be by themselves out there?
I would like to see it happening more often.
Okay.
Than it actually happens, because I mean, you know, if we look at fashion history in a way, yeah. Big successes are always about partnership, really. And it's about defining the roles, defining the level of contribution. You could be two creatives, but it depends what kind of contribution to the creativity you bring in. And in this case, for instance, both are creative minds. I don't think that one is the business partner and the other one is the creative. No. But they have very, very different take on research, on design, on what they bring to design. One is much more about the construction of clothing, and also understanding maybe more about silhouette, whether the other is definitely much more into textiles, but also has a very, very strong fashion point of view.
Yes, absolutely. Your turn. I mean, I guess that you as a journalist you have come across with the work of Stefan Cooke. Do you remember the first time that you came across?
The first time was actually his first Fashionista collection. I think I'd heard the name, but I saw that collection, thought it was really beautiful. And from the perspective of someone writing about fashion, Stefan and Jake are a kind of a dream to write about, because not only is their world really rich with kind of references, you know, in this case it's the costume department of a theatre, or kind of fashion students on the street in New York, or and you know, that's something that you can apply to many different designers, in the sense that you're kind of looking at the constellation of references that surrounds each collection and trying to find a way of kind of talking about the clothes themselves within that broader context. But what I really love about Stefan Cooke is that, you know, as a writer, I'm always wanting to be learning new things, and I don't have a background in fashion design at all, but these garments are so technically accomplished that I see them and my curiosity is instantly piqued. I'm like, how on earth did you do this? You know, it's like with the kind of tulle tank tops that they were showing, and it's also kind of overlaid onto trousers as well. But that was like the first thing that I wanted to ask them after the show.
Do you remember the first item that stand out when you saw the fashion show? I mean, do you remember the one thing that you were like, oh my God, I really love this?
I remember there was it was like a kind of chainmail vest
the
almost,
chainmail,
but made from
yeah.
buttons, and they were all hand sewn. And that level, that really meticulous kind of craft really like appealed to me. I just thought that that was really amazing that, you know, that they're willing to invest the time to make these really laborious kind of couture level in terms of man hours pieces as a kind of young emerging brand.
Absolutely. I mean, I think also the reason why I'm asking is that I always find very interesting after a few seasons that an emerging designer is showcasing how much of they have made a signature style, if we can call it that way, or if there's like a few things that you can actually immediately connect when you read the name of the designer. And I think Stefan Cooke is one of these exceptions that actually since the first show in Fashionista, they had these diamond shapes also on the knitwear. You know, they became known for the chainmail as you're describing it, and actually they have done a quite good business out of this. So it's very interesting to me to know that when you read the name of Stefan Cooke, is this coming in your heads immediately, even when you just found out about Stefan Cooke or when you know them for years?
I'm a sucker for trompe-l'oeil.
Okay.
And I think when someone uses it as intelligently as they do,
Okay.
I think it's just brilliant. And I think when I started doing research, kind of looking back at the evolution of how that was used, and now we see it like nipped in with like almost like pieces blanked out to where, you know, there's almost like a censorship of the trompe-l'oeil. Like, I find that along with the chainmail and the diamond cuts, there's something there that speaks a very interesting dialogue to the outside, because it tells all these fascinating stories, because you can, you know, the layering of those kind of random Victorian theater costumes and kind of a collage effect, that's pretty amazing. I loved that.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously you're running one of your Instagram account is probably a treasure for everyone that loves Alexander McQueen. So they would go there, they would find absolutely every single piece of information. It's so well researched, it's so well detailed.
Thank you.
When I was thinking about it, I was thinking that obviously you're somehow putting all this information that belonged to the past, actually. And it's not something that is happening right now. It's not like current. I mean, I know that you're still following the brand and you're putting out there, but most of it belongs to the archive, belongs to the past. How do you feel that social media would have affected the brand if that was happening back in the day?
Well, I think what's interesting about what Stefan Cooke is doing is when you have such a strong story, you're automatically kind of compelled to begin a history, I guess. And I think that's what's so interesting is you can see that when people look back at this moment in time, they'll be able to see the evolution of them because it's very clear, it's very concise. So, and from the people that I've spoken to since starting the account, they're finding that brands are realizing that they did not document themselves correctly. And it's becoming more and more important for brands' DNA that they have that history to fall back upon, because then you start to question authenticity and is it really speaking directly to the consumer? And without that, you kind of make this pseudo idea of who you are. And I can tell you one thing with my followers, they will sniff out kind of like falsehoods very quickly if it's not kind of, it doesn't have that soul behind it.
Because you have a very like much of the loyal fan base is there, right?
Absolutely.
And that probably like leads me to the next thing that I had in mind is that how do you, in this stage and age, how do you have a loyal customer? How do you have a loyal fan in the brand? It's a very, very difficult thing to do. And I'm wondering do you think there is any way for somebody to build a loyal audience around them, you know, in such an early stage? Anyone can take the question. Who wants to go first?
Well, first of all, I think that what distinguishes Stefan Cooke, the brand, is that it's very anti-hype.
Okay.
Whereas hype is very short-lived. You have a logo on a T-shirt, you buy it, you consume it quickly, and that was that. Whereas Stefan Cooke's pieces, referring back to the chainmail with the 7,000 buttons, there's a lot of craftsmanship and there's a lot of depth behind every piece. So I think as consumers, maybe I'm generalizing, but I think we're presented with this saturation of just stuff, and we're looking for pieces to invest in that last for more than a season. I mean, when we just looking at sustainability, but also looking at our identities. I think we're going back to, okay, this is an interesting, the Argyle vest. I mean, that's something that relates to my identity, and then you keep that. And I think, this is starting to emerge more in London, and I think that'll be prevalent in the next few seasons to come. And so they're really kind of capturing this moment in a good way.
So you think that the loyal customer should be a very specific customer, like dedicated customer to a brand. You, as a designer, you don't need to satisfy pretty much everyone, and you don't need to satisfy the big demand basically around.
But also, it's this idea that that the product is not disposable, so that, I mean, I like using the word product, because, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a fashion product, but it's also a collector's item. This I find fascinating that there is a really interesting direction that young designers are taking, going back to craft.
Yes.
It's about making the object, spending time in making the object. The object can cost whatever it costs if it's justified by the process of making. And that, by default, creates a loyal customer, because you're buying pieces. Those pieces stay in time.
What does it make a loyal reader?
I mean, from my perspective,
Who is a customer also?
Yeah.
Yes, right.
It's about the customer.
Often have to write about collections or designers that aren't necessarily my personal taste, whereas Stefan Cooke very much is. I would happily buy any of these items, so I'm a little bit biased. But I think in terms of what you were saying, they seem to have had a lot of foresight, and it's kind of taken myself and, I don't know, others off guard perhaps, because there's a real kind of modesty to what they do, so you wouldn't necessarily imagine them having that kind of ambition. But now with a few collections and looking back to the very beginning, it's all telling this very consistent story, and each collection seems to build upon the previous one and take those codes that have become, associated with them as a brand and find new ways of exploring them. In terms of loyalty, I think that says it all, really. It's the fact that there's consistency there.
Yeah, of course. Of course. So, would you like us to go in the actual collection? To start talking a bit about the Spring/Summer 20 collection. It's called Drama Major, and it's an ode to a theater archive and an off-Broadway shows that the guys actually visited New York very recently, and they got very, very inspired by it. And when the show finished, and this is what I found very interesting, I think Stefan said this, that they were talking about the relationship of acting to adapting, actually, and how they themselves found a lot of times, in a place that they have to act in many different roles, pretty much, because I think they are in that place that they feel, oh, I have to do this, and I have to do that, and I have to do that, and I have to perform in so many different levels. How do you feel about it? I mean, what Stefan said, because I think that struck in my head that, as a young designer, and both of them, I mean, there are two of them, Stefan and Jake, they have to do so many things as so many other designers at this stage. They have to be the best PR, they have to be production, they have to do, of course, shows, a great collection, and it's so much challenging. How do you find that type of relationship?
So Drama Major, the title, that made me think directly of the concept of dramaturgy, and that is from the sociologist Erving Goffman, who is saying that there's a metaphor of life being a stage, and how we are actors on that stage and how we adapt to those certain situations. And to that quote that you mentioned, it's very true that as especially a young designer, you need this sense of a costume almost as a protection, because you're flown into the spotlight in a certain way, you don't have to expose 100% of yourself, and you can use whatever outfit or to really adapt to who you are and what situation.
I think the kind of nub of that idea behind the collection as well is really charming, because it's very sincere, and it's about, you know, just very simply the joy of dressing up, basically.
Or dressing down.
Or dressing down, And also, you know, this idea that as young designers, they have to make do with what they have. So if they can't make a beautiful, like, 1920s silk bias cut gown, then they can just print it onto calico or whatever. It's like, and I like that practicality. I think it's quite witty as well.
I thought that what is really beautiful about the collection is that this idea of stage, that then, you know, you become almost the stage, you become whatever part of the stage is. And I agree with you, but also what I really love is that in a way there's also a level of owning the references. So you really declare where they come from and how creative, what is their creative contribution. And I think that it comes in the details, in the craftsmanship, but very much into the print, where the archival material becomes actually part of your creative statement, and you just own it in a way. It's sort of like, you know, you declare blatantly this is where it comes from, which is really lovely. It's an honesty to it, which is absolutely attractive.
There was an interesting interview that I think one of them were stating how they liked the speed at which they could print the types of fabrics and stuff that they were working with. And that's actually funny, because it creates this interesting, like, it's fast, anti-fast fashion. Because they're creating something quite desirable and something that you would want to archive, going back to that again, but doing it in a way that's quite clever. There's just there's a lovely intelligence to everything that they're doing there.
Absolutely. And I think also, I don't know if they did it intentionally or it just happened because they love to reuse, you know, quite a lot of fabrics or clothes, you know, like, and take a different note since the beginning. And of course, you know, right now, the hottest topic, I guess, you know, like, for everyone to discuss is about sustainability, you know, for many, of course, right reasons. And I think the way that they're doing it is actually a great message to tell to people out there that there is always a great way of repurpose, reuse, you know, and how, but it's not just that, it's how you take this to the next level, how you actually make this fashion, how you make it desirable, how do you make it a good product and belongs to you. How do you feel about this concept of repurpose, reuse?
To me, I think one of the strongest things they have is a consistent rhythm that I've seen between collections. And that makes me less want to go out and buy something quote unquote new versus buying something that I know that is going to be a piece from them that will continue to be, you know, well made and has a distinct look to it. And I find that much more interesting now than I do something that would actually be new. Like all of the diamond cut things, if you see that every show, then oh, well, I would like to get that from them because I know that it would be kind of their signature.
Well, actually, the chainmail, we're talking about the buttons chainmail, you know, it's a strap that actually, you know, attached with hooks. What I found, like, most interesting, and this is how they launched the project before, it was on vintage bags, and then, you know, this, and then after a while, you know, they start selling only the straps. So that means that actually you can use it in every single bag you want, actually, that you have. And in this kind of way, I find it very, very interesting of how they have done something of their own. And I'm talking specifically on the accessories because they have a focus on the bags, actually. You know, like in every single show, they're giving quite a lot of attention into the bag. I mean, they had the paper bag with prints on them, you know, from previous seasons of other bags. Of course, always the chainmail strap. And today we saw the new type of bag that they have done, which is again a vintage bag with white straps, leathers, that you can hold. I don't know if we have like a picture that maybe, we can look at it. But yeah, can you see the black one? So it's a vintage bag basically, and they have like attached only the white straps around it, but it makes it so modern and so cool, and yes, again, very, very desirable. And as designers, as they go to retail, they have to have those type of products that they can actually sell quite well. What's your take on the accessory side? Do you like them?
I like them very much, but I mean, like, I just want to step back a little and just say that, what's interesting is to see how consistent it is. I mean, we've said that many times, but it comes very much even from the time at school, and the reason why I'm doing this bit of backtracking is that it also, it's not fake. It doesn't come from, okay, let's do some sustainable product here. So, and it's about making do. Make do with whatever you've got, and so not necessarily as a student you can have a fantastic bag. So, and obviously, having observed Stefan and Jake, but Stefan at that point, it was all about that. It was taking like some bag taken in some sort of market or in a car boot sale, and then suddenly creating a kind of perspex bag to contain the bag, or to create a strap to put the bag, because he's so into also the image. I mean, like, these are two designers that really, really love the fashion image, and so I want to insist on that, because I think that's a really good way of of being sustainable in a way. So not necessarily thinking about it as such, but by sort of making do.
And I think also in terms of branding, this being their first show outside of Fashion East, and something, one of the most wonderful things about Fashion East is that it gives designers the funding and the platform to have a lot of fun and really kind of do whatever they want to do within those parameters. But then sometimes you can sense that maybe the panic sets in, and alongside in the final collection or in the first collection outside of Fashion East, it's like, along with the kind of crazy club kid looks, there'll be like t-shirts or whatever, and it feels a bit insincere sometimes, whereas it's like with Stefan Cooke, it feels like the more commercial pieces have been very integrated into what he's doing from the very beginning, and in a way that feels authentic and it doesn't feel cynical.
You're absolutely right to point out that this is the first solo show, of course, with the support of New Gen, because they graduated, as we call, from Fashion East, and they're moving to New Gen right now. Those years, that you saw the collection, in Fashion East, and now you're seeing this collection today. Do you see the gradual development? Do you see that this brand is heading towards a very good direction? Is it something that when you see it, you think that, oh, this might have been done differently, or how do you feel about it?
I mean, today was extremely impressive for me. I mean, today it was the real thing. It suddenly just became like another step. They didn't just graduate from Fashion East to New Gen. They just graduated into like designer world.
Yes, absolutely.
So to me, that it just oozed of quality. Really did.
I know you mentioned earlier the shoe collaboration, and I think when you start looking at those type of details, creating a complete look, you start to see we're moving into new territory now, and I am obsessed with these shoes. I would wear any of them, so I think that's another little nice key piece there.
I mean, on the design side, you have the silhouette, you have the color, you have the research behind every piece, all of the references. So design-wise, it's incredibly strong. And then when that's paired with sustainability, thinking of making men's and thinking more circular instead of just producing and making everything new. And also having a consideration for the consumer, because this is all, although very cutting edge, it is very wearable. I mean, I think we all would very happily wear, this beautiful blazer. I mean, it's gorgeous. And
absolutely, and this is what I want to say actually, because we have a bit of time to start discussing specifically about the show. First of all, we all huge admirers of what happened today, right? I mean,
Yes.
do we all agree that it was one of the best shows, and especially for Stefan Cooke? I think personally, I thought it was amazing show. The details, the craftsmanship, the work, how well thought and how well processed everything was. It was concrete. It was all very well put together. It wasn't details, and to me at least, being there and watching it, I didn't see something that looked not in the right place. But I want your personal take on it. What do you feel that way?
I agree with you that it was very, as every collection of theirs seems to have been, like very precise, very considered, but somehow not cold. It still felt kind of soulful, and I think that's because of the story and because of the kind of archival element as well. In terms of the future of the brand, I guess it's part of a bigger picture thing where, you obviously had a generation of designers 10 years ago who had these very grand ambitions to become big global powerhouse brands and wanted London fashion to be taken seriously on a kind of worldwide level. But it feels like over the past few years, these brands that have begun to kind of establish themselves, their ambitions are a bit more focused, I suppose, and it's more about finding an audience that doesn't necessarily, not every brand has to be like a $1 million a year or $10 million a year brand, but it can kind of exist, it has a right to exist within whatever parameters the designers want to set.
It's very interesting what you're saying at the moment, because I mean, based on my work, wearing a lot of different hats, I talk a lot about two young designers and emerging designers. And what surprised me so much is that now you talk to most of them and they say, I don't want the big thing. I don't want, to go out there and get, the 50 stores, the big deals in, to get into this circle of like season after season after season, producing. And I don't see somehow myself perhaps fitting 100% to the current existing model. To how much they can challenge that model, that is actually to be seen, because I think there are designers out there that they actually are doing it, in their own way. But I think this is a very positive message as well at this stage, that designers don't have to follow one specific model. And actually, they're coming out and they say, I'm willing to try different things. I want to do things on my own way. Do we all agree on this, or do we have like a bit of a different take on, for example, you're coming out, if you want to be part of this, you have to do it that way. And that's the only way, because this is how everyone done it so far.
No, I think it's wonderful they actually think that way, because by thinking that way, they help the system change. I mean, the way collections are bought, the way designers have sort of feel obliged to do this endless output of product, endless seasons, mid-seasons, whatever you want to call them, issues. So it's great to see that the new generation thinks in a different way and take responsibility for it and really, stand firm on their ground, because that is what's going to protect them. By sort of following the system, they've seen too many of their peers or maybe just seniors collapsing really badly. And so, I mean, I see students being very, very aware of that. Also education, sorry to sort of go back to that.
No, it's very important, your opinion, because
education has a huge cost.
Of course.
And that we keep forgetting. So they come out of education with enormous debts, no matter what, whether they're on scholarships or not. And so to be so brave to actually and maybe careless of consequences, which you need to be when you're young, otherwise you would never start a brand or a collection or any project. So to actually do that, then you need to be somebody who's really, really firm on their beliefs. And if it means that you're going to play this game on your own terms, then please do.
I mean, it's very interesting, your opinion about the subject, because of course, you know, your position is the one of the leading universities of the world, or probably the most leading university in the world, you know, like about creativity, about so many successful examples coming out of St. Martin's. I mean, we're not talking just, you know, a few here and there. Even the old generation that we're talking before, you know, like most of them are coming out of St. Martin's. So you see the difference based on generation, based on examples, as you mentioned, that, you know, they can see enough examples right now to compare themselves with, and so they adjust the expectations from life and from work, or so you see that happening right now to most of them, at least, I guess.
Well, I see them far ahead in comparison to a system that actually is far behind. In a way. So, you know, there's a lot of help to young designers. And, you know, I mean, this city, for instance, is the place that has helped young designers to emerge in history.
Absolutely.
You know, McQueen being one of the first exponents, and, you know, and that is great, but at the same time, it also offers them a platform that, in a way, is not that looking forward. It's sort of very status quo. So it's up to them to bring a new take advantage of whatever is given to them, but also play within the system on their terms.
What do you think, Nina?
Well, it's interesting because, I mean, this new generation, I mean, they are the disruptors. I mean, we're speaking of designers, but also journalists. I mean, they're speaking on, you know, Instagram in very new, fresh ways to communicate something. And the older establishment, I mean, they are taking notice and they are adopting their ways, learning from these more younger, more in tune creatives. And I think what's important is that there's a new definition of success, and it's not about being, you know, this demigod at a big brand. It's really about being honest with your creative vision. It's about collaborating with, you know, like-minded or not like-minded creatives to push forward something that's captivating. And also, I think it's the value of fashion isn't necessarily just, you know, the material. It's more the idea. It's that intangible, the magic behind it, and then that's applied to a range of different areas. So I'm very, you know, having looked at and spoken to the establishment versus these disruptors, I'm very optimistic with how the industry can change for the better. So, yeah.
I think that's interesting what you're saying as well, because something that I find very endearing about Stefan Cooke and a lot of those emerging designers is more of a kind of lack of ego, you know, like what you're saying about this idea of them wanting to be like the kind of cliche of the head designer of a big fashion house, and that's not on anyone's agenda, it doesn't seem, and even their approach to branding reflects that, because there's nothing which is heavily branded, and if anything, the one detail that I really, really liked in this collection was when they had that kind of Margiela-esque like conceit of printing a jacket onto the calico, and then, but on the jacket you could see the like tag inside the back of the jacket, and that was their only like little bit of branding. I just thought that was really funny and smart. It was just the tiniest little nod to their kind of logo or whatever, but it was very subtle and funny.
I also think too, and speaking as an American who lives abroad, thank goodness it is firmly in the right place, being that it's London Fashion Week. Like, this is the type of stuff that I would have fallen in love with, you know, as a young guy in America trying to dig through newspapers and crazy Elsa Clench, you know, like these are the type of things I would want to see coming across from the London fashion scene. So I think it's very refreshing to see that kind of legacy is upheld, and there's a creative drive there that is different. And I know we were talking about this earlier. It's like it should be different for British fashion. It should have that extra, you know, je ne sais quoi, and that bit of joy to it, and weirdness in a way.
But I mean, we should mention that Stefan Cooke also are in the finalists for the LVMH prize. Something extremely exciting and extremely successful. If they get it or not, we don't know yet. But it's pretty amazing that they have managed to do it. And looking at the selection on the semi-finalists, but also on the finalists, I think it's the first time that there is so much attention going on to such young designers. I mean, it was always about a young designer, but right now we see designers actually participating, that they just graduated, you know, they're just coming out from a university. It always makes me a bit question whether are they ready for so much attention at this stage or they're not. Is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? Or is it just a platform? And I'm not talking specifically for the LVMH prize, don't get me wrong, I think this is an exciting, they have so much to earn and gain, and it's a great platform. But is this only to be used as a great platform for their own good, or do you think that the attention sometimes is too much in too early stage and they don't know how to respond to all this that happens overnight?
I think I'd be really interested to hear your perspective on this as a fashion educator, but I suppose designers, their fashion education is happening kind of earlier and earlier through social media and the internet, and you know, the ability to learn about what the building blocks of starting a brand are. You know, someone can start thinking about that when they're like 13 or 14 on Instagram, and then by the time they arrive at St. Martin's at 18, then they're already like...
And it doesn't matter how naive it is, you know, I mean, it's fine. I mean, like, you know, they don't need to know everything. But exposure, I think it's so much about the individual. So, you know, regardless, I mean, you know, I think that we live in a world of exposure. So if they're not ready for exposure now, I mean, they never will be. But
we're live right now, so we are already like doing it.
They live with Instagram. I mean, you know, I mean, they sort of. But I don't know. I don't think that's something to be so afraid about. I mean, like, you know, then it's up to you, isn't it? I mean, like if you, I think that you can see among the young designers the ones that really are able to control that, to really enjoy it. I mean, if you take somebody like Charles Jeffrey, it's been years of absolute surfing exposure in a most exciting way. And that's a talent, you know. I mean, that's also. I mean, I really admire that. I think that's pretty amazing. The contrary, I would not mention. But like, you know, sometimes you see a young designer then totally buying into it and tragically really becoming a victim of it. But hey, that's part of the part of reality. I don't know. I really don't worry about it as long as there's a process, there's a genuinity, there's a commitment to their art, to their craft. I know I sound like a really old teacher, but that is what is really, really important. And as much as they understand where they are in the context of things, and that's what we do in education, is discuss, well, at least on the MA, that's what we discuss endlessly. And
but I think I have to tell you, as
they're quite resilient, you know.
For what you're saying, I mean, from my experience working from MA graduates coming from St. Martin's, they're actually very well prepared. They're ready for it. I mean, to at least the ones that you can see. I don't want to use the word stars, perhaps, but you know, the ones that are coming out and you see that they're very, very strong. They're ready for it. I mean, you give them the platform and they're ready, actually, you know, to. I mean, of course, it's a learning process for everyone, but they're doing it. But what do you feel about the very early stage? Super big attention.
Well, of course, it's very overwhelming for anybody, and so I think it's important, you know, whether you're a student, to always make that distinction that the criticism that you receive is your collection. It's not you as a person, because I think if you don't make that separation, that's when you have...
That's a difficult one.
Exactly.
You should talk. You do afterwards.
Yes. But I think what's important is to have your values and to have kind of that guiding star and to think of really the longevity of a career and not just think, okay, just, this year I have to win this award, I mean, at the end of the day, it's not about the awards, it's about you attaining the skills, attaining the, consistently learning, and, you create your own success in a way, so, yeah.
What do you think?
I mean, hats off to them, any new designer, period, because, without mentioning any specific accounts, you can be pulled up by 80 people in 2 seconds, if there's some sort of reference that you pulled from, Encyclopedia Britannica 1978, I mean, it is called out in a heartbeat. And I think when I looked at this collection and could kind of see some kind of fresh, inspiring ideas come out of here, whether that's referential to something or not, it's a new take that felt real. And to be, kind of getting your footing and starting down a career in that path and to be able to produce something like that, then hats off, because you see it all the time now on social media. You can get called out for just the most accidental thing and not even realize it sometimes. I mean, there's some people that it's not accidental, but it's challenging.
But I mean, you're absolutely right. I think that when it comes down to Stefan and Jake, it's also another word that plays around quite often is about newness, because our industry is about newness all the time. I mean, they're looking into what's new, what's coming, and you can see that with this brand. It looks so fresh, so that we haven't seen before, and I think this is why people are getting very, very obsessed with Stefan Cooke. I think for me, it's like one of the best designers that are coming out at this stage. Great champion of London creativity, but overall, in that level. And of course, they as soon as they graduated, I mean, they won the L'Oréal Professional Award, right? So from St. Martin's, then they went into Fashionist, then Nugent, LVMH Prize finalist.
They won the H&M Award.
The H&M Award that they won at some point. So it's all been very positive. Any feedback from now on to them? How they will go to the next level, or how they carry on doing what they do in the best possible way?
I think it's interesting what you're saying about newness, because you're right, obviously, but also in many ways what they're doing is taking kind of quite familiar pieces. It could be like a sweater vest, but made with materials that you wouldn't expect. So
it's like
kind of
nostalgia.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and it's kind of future-facing, but it's also, they work with a lot of vintage and archival pieces, and it's taking, garments that we're maybe very familiar with, and then kind of recreating them in something that we're not very familiar with, and that's what feels exciting. They're not trying to make something that we've completely never seen before. They're trying to kind of surprise us a little bit, maybe, instead. In terms of like what I would want from them in the future, some lower price pieces so that I can buy.
Ooh, that's interesting. Oh my God, you kept that in the end, basically. Which I would like to elaborate with. How do they do that? I mean, like, what would be the advice? Because I know that, I mean, I'm a buyer, so obviously, we want the entry price points. Everyone wants the entry price points. But it's a very difficult thing to achieve, like if you want also to keep a level and quality going into your work without compromising into something else. I mean, I'm guessing, and that's the buying experience, I guess, but all these jersey trousers, would come in a much, much more affordable way, and of course, some of the details and stuff. But do you think that I mean, I know what you mean, that it has to be accessible, at least some parts of the collection, for the customers or the fans of the brand and the designer. But would you prefer to save up to get something that you really like,
Yeah.
even if it's only one item? Or would you prefer a low price but very much of a compromise?
No, because, you know, from a very selfish point of view, that's what I want. But I also, everything that I admire about them as a brand is what makes, you know, them...
The craftsmanship, right?
Exactly, and the kind of really laborious techniques that and a lot of it's done by hand, and, you know, I think that's incredible. So, yeah, there's just an inner conflict between myself as an admirer of the brand and myself
as a customer.
potential customer.
We all have that conflict. What about you, Fabio? The future?
No, but I think I agree with you. I think that as they grow, they probably will find also a wider network of production, so the prices can go down in part. In some pieces, they have a huge potential with digital printing, which then can bring the cost down. I mean, when one looks at the collection, and it's a really, really desirable printed items. And my advice to them is to keep the genuinity, because I really think they're very genuine designers. I also think that both of them, in a way, I mean, especially Stefan, has had in time a relationship with Craig Green, work-wise, I mean. And that to me is quite apparent, this kind of commitment both to the craft side of it, to the ideas that develop in time, and that I think it's an enormous quality.
And Craig Green's a great template as a brand for balancing creativity and commerce.
Keep the good work in that way, and that's fine. I couldn't care less that now it's super expensive. I think that is justified no matter what.
When you see the amount of work and the craftsmanship that is going into it. Nina?
Well, completely agree with really preserve that genuine spirit which they have, continue with the craftsmanship. In the future, perhaps they even do this already, but when a customer buys, you know, one of those brilliant chainmail vests, you know, maybe have a program where if there is something that's broken, take it in and they would mend it. And so you always have that lifelong relationship with them. Because we were speaking of loyalty earlier, and I think if you can, you know, it's an investment to buy something that's special, but if you can say, yes, but we will always be able to fix it, I think in the future that relationship will become even more important. So, yeah.
Great. John?
I think actually Liam nailed it earlier when he said they come across as humble, and I think if they maintain that in what this is about, which it's clearly there, I think that's going to be a huge asset for them. And it's also interesting because I think there was an interview with Stefan and he smiled the entire way through it.
All right, they both smiled.
Which was so, like, that's so endearing, you know? And you again, you go back to feeling that in the clothing and don't lose that.
Personality is important.
Absolutely.
It's important nowadays, right? I mean, it's important to the times that we are. I mean, it's always been important, but right now, you know, people looking to the designers almost like as a role models, as representing, you know, the community, the ideas, specific ideas, and customers do need to know about who is behind a brand, you know, who is designing it, what type of personality they are. So is it for everyone that personality is important?
Well, I mean, yes. I mean, like, you know, smiling. I mean, the pretty, you know, it comes across quite light-hearted, really. Both of them are quite light-hearted, the work. And yet, you know, we've been talking about the work in very, you know, with a lot of cultural references, and we've been talking about the work at a high level. So, you know, and that I think it's wonderful, though, not to make it so heavy.
Yes.
Yet it has content.
So, last question, I think, is going to be, I want everyone to pick up their favorite item because I'm a lazy buyer. No, I'm kidding. So, but I'm kidding, I don't want, but we can scroll through and maybe each one of you would tell me that's my favorite item. This is in my wish list for 2020.
If we scrolled back down to one of the last images on the bottom, there's a pair of trousers. Yes, that one that has kind of like this beautiful, is it 17th century kind of theater dress printed. I would buy that in a heartbeat. I think that's incredible.
So beautiful, right? Yeah. So you're not going for the shoes?
Well, if I can get the shoes that match.
Okay, good answer. Lina.
So I'd have 2 items.
Okay.
I'd first go with the bag because I think it's timeless and very functional. And that blazer on the left, I like the kind of the Pirot reference to it. Very theatrical, and you can dress it up and down. And I would have it for life. So love it.
Cool. Fabio.
To me, it's, I love all the knitwear pieces, whether they are the tulle, hand-knotted tulle pieces, or the tulle yarn, or at the very end, a proper piece of knitwear using their...
Which one? We're talking about this one, right?
The one before last. I think that one, it's really beautiful.
So beautiful.
I would love to see myself in that, even if I think it's very much an impossibility.
Now it's very interesting what you're saying actually, because also, and it was something that I think was highlighted in backstage after the show, that if you realize also, some of their shapes and silhouettes have like a bit, evolved, in some ways, because I think that it's more and more customers that are added into the brand that, think that they're looking right now from a business perspective also, how they can grow the collection, in different silhouettes as well. Because, and I think this is a very smart business decision that they're looking into, which again, proves that is going in a very good direction for the future. What's your favorite item?
My favorite is the very first jacket with the corsetry details. So that's me. Hopefully you can stock that and give me a really nice discount.
And then I'll give you like the discount. Thank you so much for, first of all, for the buying tips. I'm going like to enter all of them.
Piece of tailoring. It's a really beautiful jacket.
It's everything is very, very beautiful, and I think like they deserve an applaud from all of us, and they did an excellent job. And thank you all for being here today, and thank you to Stefan Cooke for doing such an amazing job.
Thank you.
Thank you.